I'll never forget the day I read a book. It was contagious, 70 pages. There were pictures here and there, so it wasn't hard to bear. The day I read a book.
Hi everybody, welcome to Mrs. Miller's Seaside Sunday. And on the beach I found a couple fun shells. I don't know if you've seen ones that have looked like this before. This one is a little bit smaller. There's a little bit of brown in the center. But both of these shells are actually parts of a skeleton of a little sea creature, little sea animal called a chiton, C-H-I-T-O-N. So these are both end pieces, what would be at kind of what we'd think of as the tail. And then there'd be skeleton-like pieces that look similar to this. See how this has the little fringed part there. So I'll have to look up to see the specific kinds of chitons like this. My cousin Julie knows the answer to that. I'll have to check with her. But I know they belong to chitons, two different kinds. And so maybe you find pieces like that on the beach. They're actually whole pieces. All right, I want to read to you today Cranberry Valentine. It's by Wende and Harry Devlin. It was a gray February day in Cranberry Port, and the warm fire was welcome in Grandmother's kitchen. Maggie, Grandmother, and Mr. Whiskers sat around the table amid ribbon, lace, and pink hearts. Maggie was making valentines for her friends. Valentine's Day was only a week away. Mr. Whiskers, Maggie's friend and neighbor, looked wistful. When I was in school, no one ever sent me a valentine, he said. Never. Later, after Mr. Whiskers had returned to his little gray cottage over the dunes, Maggie spoke to Grandmother. Poor Mr. Whiskers, I feel sorry for him. He's never gotten a valentine, she said. Grandmother was in a rush. I'm off to my sewing circle, Maggie. Can we talk about it tonight? 2 days later, Mr. Whiskers' fortune had changed, but he didn't think it was for the better. It's terrible, Maggie. Look what somebody sent me. He stood at Maggie's door in a fury and waved a frothy, lacy valentine in the air. It's all about cupids, lovebirds, hearts, and flowers, and it smells like rose perfume. He wrinkled his nose. How sweet, said Maggie. Revolting. Who did it? I wonder if it could have been that lady in the green coat. Yesterday she asked me where you lived, said Maggie. Mr. Whiskers didn't worry too much until he received 3 more fragrant valentines at the Cranberry Port post office the very next day. He quickly hid them under his coat. Now Mr. Whiskers was getting nervous. At Seth's general store, 2 more greetings for Mr. Whiskers appeared mysteriously. Gosh, listen to this one, Mr. Whiskers, cried Seth. Little Cupid shot his dart. Love for you has filled my heart. Be my Valentine. Mr. Whiskers turned red and he hid his face behind the mops. Say, all week some lady in green coat has been here asking questions about you, said Seth. Suffering codfish, somebody's after me, groaned Mr. Whiskers. Could be, said Seth. Why me? Asked Mr. Whiskers. Then he reflected. Why not? I am the best clam digger in Bod County. I have wonderful whiskers. I sing like a blinking bird. Seth broke into Mr. Whiskers' shining thoughts. Now, Mr. Whiskers, if some lady gives you a present on this Valentine's Day, you should have a box of chocolates to give in return. A gentleman would. Mr. Whiskers looked terrified at the idea. Seth chose a red satin heart-shaped box and handed it to his friend. At the sound of the door opening, the storekeeper looked up. Oh, here comes the lady who's been looking for you, said Seth. Ma'am, I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Whiskers. The lady in the green coat. Mr. Whiskers froze. He was trapped like a fly in a honey pot. The lady in the green coat flew across the room to him. Aha! Mr. Whiskers at last. I've been looking for you everywhere. I hear you are the best man in town to fix an old chimney. Fix a chimney? That's all? I mean, it would be a pleasure, ma'am. When the lady in green left, Mr. Whiskers did a little sailor's jig. Saved, he cried. I'll give the candy to Maggie and grandmother, he decided. He whistled all the way to their house on the edge of the bog. At the door, he bowed deeply to Maggie. Candy for my best friends, he announced. Come in, said Maggie. Look, grandmother, Mr. Whiskers has a present for the whole sewing circle. Mr. Whiskers heard a hum of voices in the parlor. Well, I don't know. Mr. Whiskers hesitated. Candy for all of us? Asked grandmother. The ladies in the circle stopped their sewing and looked up. They began to smile. How did you know it was the sewing circle who was sending you all those valentines? We've been busy trying to keep you guessing, and all the time you knew it was us, declared grandmother. Mr. Whiskers shuffled his feet. Suddenly he put it all together. Those were the secret admirers who had scared him with valentines. He drew a breath. Knew? Of course I knew, he sputtered. Suffering codfish. You can't fool an old seabird like me. Grandmother seated him near the fire with tea and cake. When the red satin box was passed around, he poked 4 chocolates before he found one with a caramel filling. Grandmother pretended not to see that. Mr. Whiskers beamed. It wasn't so bad to be the Valentine of a whole sewing circle, he decided. Valentine's Day could be a wonderful day for people to think of one another. Now he could hardly wait for next year. Happy Valentine's Day. From the Seaside.
One day I read a book, I can't remember when, but one of these days I'm gonna do it again, yes sir. One of these days I'm gonna do it again.